Breaking right now on Morning News Now, parts of Los Angeles reduced to rubble from the most destructive wildfire in the city's history. This morning, several wind-fueled fires still burning out of control. At least 10 people are dead, thousands forced to evacuate, and too many homes to count now gone.
It's just stunned, shocked, speechless.
This is a tragedy. And you just never think it's going to be you. And now that it is me, I can't tell you the amount of heaviness in this disaster.
And it's far from over, with those historic fire conditions expected to pick up again today. We have team coverage. And from fire to ice, millions of Americans bracing for a powerful winter storm stretching across the southeast. We're tracking the conditions, the dangers, and what to expect for your weekend. Also, sentencing day this morning. President-elect Donald Trump set to be sentenced in his New York hush money conviction after the Supreme Court rejects his request for a delay 10 days before his inauguration. What to expect and what happens next. Plus, TikTok on the clock. The nation's high court set to hear arguments on a potential nationwide TikTok ban. More on the case and how the outcome could impact its tens of millions of users. Good morning. Good to have you with us on a busy Friday. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment and will join us in just a few minutes. We begin this Friday morning with those devastating wildfires that continue to plague Southern California. We now know the fires have killed at least 10 people, with nearly 180,000 people forced out of their homes. The Palisades Fire, which remains the largest fire, has now burned nearly 20,000 acres. That's an area bigger than Manhattan. Officials say it's destroyed about 5,000 structures and is now about 6% contained. Firefighters also battled a new brush fire, the Kenneth Fire, in the Woodland Hills area of L.A. That led to more evacuations, but those orders were later lifted. The Eaton Fire, which started outside of Pasadena, has now spread up Mount Wilson. That fire threatening communication towers and the historic Mount Wilson Observatory. New drone footage is giving us a bird's eye view of the widespread damage caused by these fires. Many homes and businesses remain without power this morning. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass spoke yesterday about a call she had with President Biden and the relief that is heading to the region.
The president announced the federal government would pay for 100% of disaster response costs from the wildfires in this area. This is unprecedented because usually it is not 100%.
We have team coverage ahead this hour, including the latest on the forecast and those strong wind gusts expected to pick up again today. We're also going to catch up with the Salvation Army and its relief efforts. But let's begin with NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin joining us again from Altadena. Dana, good morning. So you are at the Eaton Fire, a stubborn one, proving to be a challenge for firefighters. 0% contained as of last night, burning thousands of acres there. Just tell us, what's the latest on the ground this morning?
Yeah, Joe, good morning to you. That fire now 13,000 acres. I will tell you, compared to what we saw yesterday, things are a lot different in terms of law enforcement. You can see behind me, we've got more California Highway Patrol vehicles. And even as we turn this way, you can see several flashing red and blue lights down the way. The California National Guard has also deployed here. We've got several in Hummers and vehicles just like this. We actually saw a caravan of National Guard's crew members rolling through this area. You know, right now there is a curfew in place. It lasts from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's because there is still a safety concern in these areas, and it's also to keep people from going into these communities and possibly looting or causing more devastation out there. Sheriff Robert Luna for L.A. County actually talked a little bit about that. Listen.
Our goal is to attempt to implement a curfew within the specific impacted areas around the two fire areas, both for Palisades and Eaton. Having the National Guard with us, which will augment those resources, will help send a stronger message, keep people out of the impacted areas so we don't continuously victimize the people who have already been victimized.
And that message is very loud and clear. They are being very diligent in keeping people from going into this area. Compared to yesterday, we saw several people just able to walk in, whether they were residents or not. Joe?
So, Dana, let's talk more about what we just heard from the sheriff there, some of the resources coming in to help with these fires. I mean, the fight's been going on for days.
Yeah.
That is pushing Southern California firefighters and first responders to the limit. What other outside help is on the way?
So additional 900 firefighters are being deployed to this area to try to help with those firefighting efforts. I was listening to one firefighter talk on another network, and he just talked about how they are pushed to the brink, but that they are not giving up this fight. Some of them having to sleep nearby those firefighting zones just so that they are not giving up. This is a relentless fight, and those firefighters are vowing to stay and to give as much as they've got. Joe?
Dana, I also want to ask you about an evacuation alert that was sent out yesterday in error. It went out to nearly 10 million people in the LA area. I mean, folks are already incredibly anxious, on standby because of these fires. Yeah. What happened here?
So this happened just before 4 o'clock last night, and our crew is on kind of like the graveyard shift. So we were already in bed, some of us, and that thing started blaring. It was very nerve-wracking because we had that Kenneth fire that popped up, so we did not know if this was a new fire or if this was the Kenneth fire. And then 20 minutes later, a message was sent to say disregard. Officials say that this was not human-caused and that they are working with the system operator to try to figure out what went wrong. They say that the evacuation area that was supposed to receive that alert was entered correctly into their system. So we definitely have a lot of questions as to what went wrong. A lot of people, were freaked out about that, but luckily they sent a message saying disregard that message, and I think that put a lot of people at ease. But obviously, it's a really tense situation out here because communities have been wiped off the map. So when you get an alert and you aren't expecting it, it's really concerning.
Understandably so. All right, Dana, thanks so much for your reporting. We appreciate it. For more on the volunteer efforts, let's bring in Major Anthony Barnes. He is General Secretary of the Salvation Army's Southern California Division. Major Barnes, thank you for your time this morning after what I know has been a long couple days here. You're one of those organizations that's you're already there embedded in the Southern California community. You're there all year long. Talk about how you're helping people who've been evacuated and also those who've lost everything this week.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. We're just trying to surround those who are in the most need right now. You mentioned being here as part of the community. We're a part of the community before disaster happens, during and after. And in fact, some of our own people have been impacted by this. But it is our pleasure to serve those who are struggling. We're out there feeding from moment to moment, meal to meal, making sure that people have their most basic needs met: water, food, clothing, just to meet those immediate needs, and then we'll move into the next stage when that time comes.
I mean, when you look at just the unprecedented scale of this destruction, it's overwhelming. Where do you even begin?
Well, we begin with just what I mentioned. What is of most need right now? Aside from making sure they have food and water and clothing, we need to make sure that we help to begin to restore hope. So we have our teams out there, emergency disaster response experts that are providing skilled relief services, whether that's emotional care, spiritual care, food, clothing, water. And we're waiting even now for when the evacuations are lifted so that we can walk alongside of those folks in their communities, many which have lost homes. And we want to walk right alongside them as they're kind of discovering what's next.
When people arrive at the evacuation centers, what is it you find they need the most right away?
Many of them are just trying to figure out, how do I get in contact with other loved ones? They've lost so much. Many have even lost the way to communicate their phones and any of the electronics that they had. So we're trying to make a way to provide them even with access to communication. How can we get them in contact with their family members or their loved ones? How do we reconnect families that may have been on different sides of town? And then, of course, those immediate needs that I mentioned before.
This is a crisis, of course. It's going to be unfolding for many months, if not years, after these fires are finally put out. How can the public help the Salvation Army do the kind of work that's needed now and that's going to be needed for those many months to come?
For the many months that are to come, we're going to need lots of different resources. But right now, we are trying to meet those immediate needs. And so monetary donations are needed more than ever, especially in the moment. People can go and visit salvationarmyusa.org. or they can call 1-800-SALARMY and make a donation. This gives us the flexibility to meet the myriad of needs that are coming before us. But yes, we are going to have restoration of pre-disaster services coming up soon, where we want to make sure we get people to the state that they were at before this disaster happened. And so we will use some of those donations for that, some for what the immediate needs are, and to make sure that people are whole again.
A reminder, it is a step-by-step process, and there are so many people who don't live in Southern California who are looking for ways to help. This is one way to do that. Major Barnes, thank you for your help this morning and for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, and thank you for your support.
It is a week of fire and ice. While crews fight to put out the raging wildfires in California, much of the South is in the midst of a major winter storm and deep freeze. As you can see, states from the plains and southeast are dealing with a combination of snow, sleet, and freezing rain. Governors are declaring states of emergency as the storm creates major travel disruptions. More than 2,000 flights have been canceled in and out of Dallas airports already since the storm started. Southerners have barely recovered from another storm that hit earlier in the week. Well, now comes this new round of winter weather. Some of the heaviest snowfall expected today in Arkansas and Tennessee. With everything that's going on, let's take a closer look at what you can expect with your Morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Angie Lastman has been busy all week long and is tracking the very latest all across the country. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Let's start with that winter storm that you just mentioned, then we'll move to fires here in a moment. Big chunk of the country, nearly 100 million people under these winter alerts. So this is the area, these are the areas, I should say, that are going to be affected by this winter storm as it continues to be on the move through the day today. Here's what we've currently got. Notice the snow across parts of the Midwest, stretching back to places like Illinois and Missouri, but also stretching down into parts of the southeast. We've got the rainy side of this as well as we get a little farther to the south, and that's going to be kind of the scene that we set for parts of the southeast and points south of that here as we go through the day today. But it's going to be the snow for places like, as you mentioned, Little Rock, where we'll see that heaviest kind of snow set up from basically now through noon, the first half of the day. And notice how high those totals could be, up to 9 inches. We could have more than a half of a foot across this region. St. Louis going to see some additional snowfall. Nashville, as we get closer to basically 6 p.m., we'll start to see this wrap up. But we've got the whole day to kind of pick up some additional snowfall, again, up to 7 inches for that region. And Atlanta, it's not just the snow that we're going to watch for here through the afternoon hours. It's also the potential to see up to 1/4 of an inch of icing on those roadways. So again, this is going to be problematic for travel, air travel, but also road travel. You'll want to be able to get a little extra time for that morning commute in some of these spots. Big picture look for out west. We've got the red flag warnings still in effect. Those are going to stay at least through tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if they're extended beyond that. But 17 million people across this region with the Santa Ana winds still coming in around 60 miles per hour and higher in some spots. We've also got those relative humidity values. They've seen a slight uptick. We're into the double digits potentially by the time the day goes on, but still very dry by all standards of things. Here's the 5 fires that we're still watching. Notice what we're seeing as far as current wind gusts right now. Places like near the Lydia fire, 65-mile-per-hour gusts in the last hour. We've got 50s closer to Santa Clarita, closer to the coast, not quite as gusty, still 10, 15, even close to 30-mile-per-hour gusts are going to be possible. But up to 50 and 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts, I should say, will be possible through the day today, specifically the first half of the day. Now, second half of the day, notice what happens. We've got a lot of single digits out here for our wind forecast as we get into the evening hours. 10, 15, 20-mile-per-hour winds, not great still when you're fighting fire, but a lot better than what we're expecting for the first half of the day. But notice that we still are going to see this kind of a roller coaster ride when it comes to these winds as we set ourselves up for another Santa Ana wind event. So, Joe, this is what we've got for the fire weather threat today. Still a critical risk for some, but more Santa Ana wind events to come as we wrap up the weekend and head into next week.
Tough to hear that. All right, Angie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Today will bring a landmark moment in U.S. politics. President-elect Trump will be sentenced later this morning in his New York criminal hush money case. Once that happens, he'll officially become a convicted felon just 10 days before his inauguration. The sentencing is moving forward after the Supreme Court denied Mr. Trump's 11th hour request to block the sentencing late yesterday. That was a 5-4 ruling, with the majority saying, in part, the burden that sentencing imposed on Mr. Trump was, quote, relatively insubstantial. Last year, the president-elect was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. It's all related to hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels in the lead up to the 2016 presidential election. Daniels testified she had a sexual encounter with Mr. Trump in 2006, which he denied. NBC News correspondent Yasmin Masugian is outside the courthouse in New York City. Our legal analyst, Danny Savalos, is with us on set to break it all down. Good morning to both of you. Yasmin, let's start with you. The judge has already indicated there will not be any jail time, no prison time for Mr. Trump, who is expected to attend virtually today. So what can we expect from today's sentencing?
This is finality from a months-long trial, a years-long story as well, Joe, as we well know, regarding the hush money trial that we all watched throughout the spring with then former President Donald Trump, now President-elect, just 10 days away from his inauguration, being sentenced today in the building behind me by Judge Juan Merchan. The expectations here are pretty clear in that Merchan, in issuing this date of January 10th for his sentencing, saying this is going to be an unconditional discharge, essentially meaning there will be, in fact, no penalty, but will provide finality to this entire moment, this entire trial that we all watched play out in the spring. And then there will come, obviously, the appeal. What we're expecting today, essentially, is hearing from the prosecuting attorneys from the DA's office, followed by Todd Blanche, the lead defense attorney, along with likely President-elect Donald Trump, again, just 10 days away. I mean, the unprecedented moment of this time from his inauguration. And then Judge Juan Merchan likely issuing the finality of this whole thing, right? Issuing the sentencing for President-elect Donald Trump. And one more thing I'll say is, as we mentioned last spring, as we were watching this trial play out, we said, in fact, former President Donald Trump, now President-elect, was fighting for his freedom when it came to the November elections. And in fact, he won that freedom when he won the election in November, Joe.
So, Danny, unconditional discharge, assuming that is the sentence here, what exactly does that mean for the president-elect?
A lot of people are calling this no jail time. That's really only half the story. Under New York law, an unconditional discharge is an option for a judge. As a defense attorney, I've never seen it because it's essentially a sentence of no sentence whatsoever. Yes, no jail time, but no probation, no monitoring, no ankle bracelet, no house arrest, no community service. It's nothing. And in even talking to my practitioner friends, we agree, has anyone even seen this before? Because how often would you expect, especially in a felony, admittedly a low-level felony situation, that the client would get nothing at all? You would expect probation, but that is constitutionally impossible. Justice Merchan knows it because any sentence that has any kind of tail, any kind of lingering existence after Trump is inaugurated is arguably completely unconstitutional and void from the moment he takes office.
So, Yasmin, we know that Mr. Trump did react to yesterday's Supreme Court decision, maybe kind of a surprising reaction from him. Talk about that and just how he's likely to proceed moving forward after today.
So let's remember, this date has been delayed multiple times, right? Initially, it was scheduled for mid-July. It was delayed twice. And then the election came. Todd Blanche obviously lobbied to delay it once again because of the unprecedented nature of sentencing a now President-elect Donald Trump. We heard from President-elect Donald Trump just yesterday evening, somewhat surprising to say the least, especially when it came to his opinion on the Supreme Court's decision in allowing this sentencing to go forward. Let's take a listen to that, Joe, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Appeal anyway, just psychologically, because frankly, it's a disgrace. It's a judge that shouldn't have been on the case. He's a highly conflicted judge, and they called for an appeal. So I read it, and I thought it was a fair decision, actually. So I'll do my little thing tomorrow.
So unsurprising that he would go after Judge Juan Merchan, but not necessarily surprising, in fact, what we all expected, that President-elect Donald Trump will, in fact, be appealing going forward, Joe.
Yeah, so Danny, let's talk about what comes after today, and that will be this appeals process, which is typically pretty standard. Explain to us what we can expect here.
Yes, technically, even though Trump has been convicted, and he was convicted months ago, the actual conviction is not final. The judgment is not final until after sentencing. And that's the way it is in most jurisdictions, including the federal system. The notice of appeal, your opportunity to appeal, you can't appeal until the judgment's final. It's not final till sentence is entered. Once that's entered on the system in the trial court level, then you have your 30 days in which to file your notice of appeal. And after that, not a whole lot happens. It's a lot of paperwork, preparing briefs, but that's procedurally what will happen. And really, when you think about it, this is the first appropriate time, really, that Trump could have been appealing. And yet we know he's been appealing throughout the life of this entire case. This is normally the very first time a defendant appeals, but that's not the case in this case.
All right, Danny, we're going to ask you to stick around for our next story. Yasmin, thank you so much for your reporting. We really do appreciate it. Speaking of the Supreme Court, this morning, the justices are set to hear arguments that could determine the future of the social media platform TikTok here in the U.S. In 10 days, a controversial federal law banning TikTok is set to take effect. The bipartisan legislation was passed last year. Several lawmakers allege that China-based TikTok poses a threat to national security, arguing it could be used by that country to manipulate public opinion or get access to Americans' data. The law states that the platform's Chinese parent company, ByteDance, has to sell or divest it by January 19th, so that's 9 days from now, or it gets banned. TikTok says the law violates both its First Amendment rights and that of its millions of American users. When the law was enacted in April, ByteDance said it would not sell the social media service. Critics say the law violates Americans' right to free speech. We have team coverage of TikTok's case this morning. NBC News legal analyst Annie Savallo sticking around, and our own Savannah Sellers is in Washington, D.C. Savannah, good morning. Let's start with you. Set the stage for us. What can we expect from today's hearing? What are both sides going to be arguing here?
Hi, Joe. Good morning from a frigid but gorgeous Washington, D.C. I'll be heading in to hear the arguments in just a couple hours. But here's where we stand this morning, where things start. So TikTok is arguing that banning TikTok would be a violation of free speech, both for the company as well as the users. TikTok has sued over this, but so have users of TikTok, creators on that app. On the other hand, the government is saying that TikTok is a national security threat because its parent company, it's called ByteDance, has Chinese ownership. There's a concern over what could happen to American data, the 170 million or so Americans who use that app, the information that they're feeding it by using it every day, as well as if there would be an implication for China, an ability for China to push any type of content to American users. Now, we have not seen any direct evidence of that. We've been asking questions to see if it's even possible. No smoking gun, though, and much of these legal arguments have actually been redacted. So that's what I will be listening for today in court. Two things. First of all, will we learn anything that makes that fear of a national security threat more concrete? And secondly, how can we read the tea leaves for what we start to hear from the justices? I'm sure Danny will touch on this, but what we were waiting to hear was if the Supreme Court would pause the law in the meantime, because right now there's just 9 days until that ban goes into effect. Will the Supreme Court pause it? So far, they have chosen not to. And will they come out pretty strong against TikTok? What type of questions are they asking today? What will we hear in arguments? For now, President-elect Trump, he has asked the Supreme Court to pause it. They have not responded to that, but that's something that we actually could learn today. Does the ban go on pause?
All right, so Danny, let's look at the past here and some of the precedents and past First Amendment cases that are similar to this. We've really seen the court rule against the government, deciding national security doesn't require censoring what newspapers could publish or what information Americans have access to. This goes beyond publication. This is saying we're going to get rid of the entire platform. What are you expecting? What are the justices going to likely need to hear to either stop this law or say, hey, let's move forward with this?
That's right. And many times the law itself will get struck down if it falls into a category, and you're going to hear these words, strict scrutiny. What makes this case so unique is that the lower court actually concluded that the highest level of scrutiny of the statute, in other words, the statute had the highest likelihood of being struck down under this test. And it's any time a law infringes on the content of your First Amendment speech rights, it is highly likely to be struck down. And yet the lower court, the D.C. Court of Appeals, concluded that even though this very difficult test applies, the government has met it based on these allegations of this threat to national security. That seems to me to be a test that another court, the Supreme Court, could come down on the other side, simply because the nature of strict scrutiny is that the government is the underdog and the challenger here, TikTok, is the odds-on favorite to win.
So, Savannah, TikTok, to put it quite simply here, as you mentioned, the court's going to have to act pretty quickly. Do we have an idea of just how quickly the court could act in this situation? And if this does take effect, how is it going to impact the more than 110 million TikTok users here in the U.S.?
Yeah, Joe, so today we would not actually get the decision from justices. We wouldn't get an opinion or anything like that today. But we could hear them decide to put a stay on this ban if they are feeling like it's going to take them more than 9 days to decide what they are going to do. And again, as I just mentioned, President-elect Trump has also asked for that. We heard him say he wants to save TikTok. He's met with the TikTok CEO at Mar-a-Lago. In terms of what could happen, so when we say a ban, it's not going to like poof, disappear off of your phone. A couple things will happen. The law, though it's targeting TikTok, it actually applies to the places like the App Store. So that would be on Apple to no longer offer TikTok to be able to be downloaded. Places, companies like Oracle, these servers that are actually hosting the TikTok technology. So those companies would no longer be able to do that. Or I should actually say it would be illegal for them to do so. Now, Trump could, as president, say, actually, you know what, Attorney General Pam Bondi, I don't want you to enforce that. And then that opens up a whole can of legal questions in terms of what happens. But if the ban were to go into effect and those companies were to abide by that law, if you have TikTok already on your phone, you'd still be able to use it, but you'd stop getting updates. Now, the TikTok algorithm is extremely complicated, extremely complex. It's exactly why people love TikTok so much. There are constant updates being pushed to that app. So eventually, probably, I spoke with an insider, an ex-employee of TikTok who worked on that algorithm team. He estimated that within a couple months, TikTok essentially wouldn't be the TikTok that you know anymore because it would be slower. The algorithm would not be feeding you that content you like as accurately as it currently does. But you would still have TikTok on your phone for at least a few months.
So, Danny, I'll ask you. So if this law takes effect, perhaps the Supreme Court doesn't stop it, and a few months down the road, the president, Donald Trump, says, I don't like this. Is there anything he can do about it at that point once the law has taken effect?
Yes, in a way. I mean, he can't strike down the law. He doesn't have that power. But a president has a lot of power, especially under this particular statute, in deciding enforcement and deciding what kind of conduct or what kind of company might fall within the purview. So, and this is very common. A great example is marijuana. Marijuana is still technically illegal in the United States. It's just that the DOJ and the executive branch and the president have decided, yeah, it's a law, but how seriously are we going to take it? President can do the exact same thing with federal law here. He can't get rid of it, but he can do a lot of things in enforcing or slow walking the enforcement of that law.
All right, Danny and Savannah, thank you both. Appreciate it. Big day ahead here. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, continuing coverage on the wildfires that are raging across Los Angeles. We're going to have an update on the firefight, plus a look at the financial toll of all this devastation. First, though, after the break, major developments in a high-profile rape case out of France by the founder of a notorious website is now being charged. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. negotiators are in Qatar this week. They're trying to reach a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. It would finally bring home the remaining Israeli hostages who have been held in Gaza for more than 15 months. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez spoke to a mother whose one-year-old daughter has never met her American-Israeli father. She was born after October 7th, 2023, and her dad was taken hostage by Hamas, and he is still in captivity today.
Smiling, bouncy, and hungry for cake, baby Shahar turns 1 in Israel. A blow of the candle and a wish from her sister that one day she'll meet her daddy. Her father, 36-year-old American-Israeli Sagi Dekelhen, kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. He's missed every moment of Shahar's short life, from her birth to her first birthday.
It's an unbelievable situation.
For 461 days, Sagi's wife Abital has held their family together alone.
How I can stand near to the table with cake and balloon and present and, and in the same time, my husband needs to survive.
But this new year, signs of hope. After 15 months of war, the U.S. says there's progress towards a ceasefire and hostage deal that comes amid a healthcare crisis in devastated Gaza. And now, President-elect Trump with a warning before his January 20th inauguration.
If these hostages aren't back home by that date, all hell's going to break out.
Does that give you hope?
Yes, of course. I'm so appreciate that Trump give attention, but now I'm waiting for actions.
Shahar has 2 older sisters, Bar and Gali. Every year, their parents made photo albums on their birthdays.
How do you feel when you look at these happy times together?
I feel it will happen again.
It'll come again.
Yeah.
This year, a struggle to finish Shahar's album.
You don't feel like you can make this album without a picture of her and her dad together?
Now I'm waiting for the last page. That maybe with the miracle, Sagi will back tomorrow.
An album waiting to be finished, and a family waiting to be made whole. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Kiryat Gat, Israel.
Russia is accusing Ukraine of launching a deadly strike on a supermarket in the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk. NBC News international correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian has that and some other world headlines. Danielle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe, and that's where we start today. The Russian-held city of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, where dash cam footage posted by a driver appears to show the moment a supermarket was struck. Russia is accusing Ukraine, as you mentioned, of firing a U.S.-supplied missile into the area during the morning rush hour and says 2 people were killed, another 2 at least were injured. Ukrainian officials have yet to comment. To France now, where the founder of the notorious website Coco.fr was indicted. That website was linked to more than 23,000 cases of sexual abuse, among them a case that made headlines around the world. It was used by Dominique Pellicot to invite dozens of men to rape his wife, who he had drugged. The website, created in 2003, was shut down back in June, and Pellicot, along with 50 other men, were found guilty last month, mostly of raping his ex-wife Giselle while she was unconscious. And finally, here's a look at Harbin in northeast China, where it is freezing cold. Perfect weather for the very skilled sculptors who have turned blocks of ice into landmark castles and temples, like the Taj Mahal in India, the Osaka Castle of Japan, and Beijing's very own Temple of Heaven. Joe, back to you.
It's gotta be so hard to do when your fingers are like numb from the ice cold. All right, Danielle, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, a state of emergency in Southern California. When we return, we're going to take you back to Los Angeles for the latest on several wildfires still burning out of control. Plus, more on the financial toll facing homeowners and how its impact could be felt beyond California. You're watching Morning News Now. We're back now with our continuing coverage of the Southern California wildfires. Dry conditions and powerful winds are fueling the flames, with at least 5 wildfires now burning in the LA area. The fires have killed at least 10 people, with another 180,000 evacuated from their homes. Strong wind gusts are in the forecast again today, creating more obstacles for exhausted firefighters who are trying to get those flames under control. It is so bad, the NFL is now moving the LA Rams wild card playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings to Arizona. The league announced that decision yesterday, just hours after a fire broke out near the Rams training complex. That playoff game set to take place on Monday night. As the images continue to come out of Southern California, entire blocks and neighborhoods reduced to ash. The federal impact of this disaster could have long-lasting implications. The economic losses due to the fire estimated to reach at least $20 billion, according to J.P. Morgan. That's why we have our senior business correspondent, Christine Romans, here to talk more about that. Let's just start just with one of these fires, the Palisades Fire, the most destructive in L.A. history. About 5,000 structures destroyed. We know many of those are homes. And this is an affluent community, so the median home price, $3 million here. I mean, just this one fire alone, do we have an idea of how that could impact the insurance industry here in California?
It would be incredibly expensive. And already you've seen State Farm, for example, was not renewing some people in that neighborhood because it just looks at the models and says the cost to rebuild if there were a fire catastrophe here would be, you know, insurmountable to offer insurance at reasonable rates in this area. So there are some people who don't have policies there because they've been dropped by their insurer. There are others who have dropped their insurance because the insurance, it was double-digit price increases for insurance in this area. So this will be a really big test of California here in terms of how do you rebuild that area and how much will it cost?
Let's just zoom out here, big picture questions, no matter where you are in the country. If you're in a disaster-prone area or if you're just in an area that is affluent, that has high-priced real estate, What are some of the questions insurance companies are asking themselves right now about whether they can even stay in business in these places?
Well, if you look at California, for example, Moody's did this beautiful, actually tragic analysis of the past decade with the fires. For every dollar in premiums that the insurers took in from people, they paid out $1.08. That is impossible math. You look at the rest of the country, I'm sure everyone watching here has noticed that their homeowners insurance has been rising. So it's not just where there's a disaster zone where you have insurance rates rising. It's everywhere because insurance is a big pool, right? It's a big pool. So all of these costs are shared. So I think the bottom line here is that we can expect insurance rates to rise for everyone. We live in a world where there are more natural disasters, there are longer hurricane seasons, there are fire seasons that last all year in California. This is a new normal here.
Yeah, because it wasn't that long ago when January you would have never even thought of a wildfire burning in Southern California. Is this the tipping point that you think we're at right now?
I think so. Already California regulators had been making some changes to their pricing models in California because they know that math doesn't work, right? So I think this is a tipping point. I also think that, again, higher prices for premiums, I think it's here to stay.
All right. Christine Romans, appreciate your reporting on this. Thank you so much. Let's bring in NBC News senior national correspondent, News Now anchor Tom Yamas. He is in the Pacific Palisades tracking the Palisades Fire just outside of L.A. Tom, good morning. This is, as we mentioned, the most destructive fire in L.A. history. It's burned an area larger than all of Manhattan. Talk about the latest on the conditions and just what you're seeing on the ground where you are.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Great to be with you. Yeah, the problems are mounting here in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood. Besides being completely destroyed, you can see this water is still running. And remember, we've had that issue with firefighters getting low pressure out of the fire hydrant. Something like that is not going to help. This was a neighborhood here. This was a home. It is completely gone. You can see what these wildfires did to the structure. You can't even make out what you're looking at in many cases. You can see the cars here completely burnt out. I mean, this fire was so strong in some cases, it burned the steel off these cars. You see what's something sort of the molten steel here on the ground. These areas are very dangerous, and so officials no longer want people coming out here. A lot of the roads are blocked as well, and officials also want to implement a curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. because there have been cases of looting, and already there have been arrests.
So, Tom, at the top of the hour, we talked with Dana Griffin, who was at the Eaton fire. That's the one just outside of Pasadena. It's another one firefighters are working hard to try and contain. And one thing here, people hear the name Mount Wilson. That's important because there are a lot of transmitters, broadcast towers there for TV and for radio that are really essential for the entire L.A. region, right?
Yeah, they are, and it got a little dicey yesterday. Firefighters, though, had it under control. Our choppers were in the air over the fire as it sort of approached the towers, which, as you mentioned, are broadcast towers, cell towers as well. Luckily, they had that one under control. They were able to fight those flames before they got to any of the infrastructure there. But it's stuff like that, you know, getting close to sort of that critical infrastructure that is really worrying people all across Los Angeles. And even though there's large areas of the city that are not affected by the wildfires, you smell the smoke everywhere you go. Right the moment I got off the plane at LAX, right when we just got out of the plane, you could smell the smoke. It's hazy everywhere you go. And people that live sort of near the fires are getting worried on whether they should evacuate or they shouldn't. Everyone is following the weather, too, to see which way those winds go.
Let's talk about the federal response to the fire, Tom. We know L.A. Mayor Karen Bass spoke with President Biden on the phone. What can L.A. expect in terms of those relief efforts, especially when it comes to federal relief?
Look, it's unclear what's going to happen. That obviously always takes time, and politicians always make promises. I'm not saying they're not going to deliver, but I will tell you what's going to be the number one issue possibly after this is all said and done is the issue of insurance, because people they've lost everything in sight. In a lot of cases, they were kicked off their policies. They no longer have fire insurance, so they've quite literally lost everything. There is nothing left, and they won't be able to rebuild. And so I was speaking to a councilwoman about this yesterday, and she says they're going to try to fight hard. They're going to speak to the insurance agents here in California, the commissioner of insurance, to try to figure out how they can get these people whole again. But in some cases, it's unclear if that's going to happen. And, Joe, I know you know this because you lived out here. There's already a housing crisis in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine who lives here pointed this out to me. Rents are already very high here. You're now going to have these large areas of Los Angeles where you cannot live anymore. Those people are going to need to rent. That's only going to drive prices up, and some people are going to be pushed out.
Huge issue there that is going to last months, if not years, in the L.A. area. Tom Yamas, appreciate your reporting. Thanks so much for joining us. Captain Brandon Silverman of the LA City Fire Department joins us now for more on the effort to contain these fires. Captain, thank you so much. Let's talk where Tom is. The Palisades Fire, it's burned more than 20,000 acres. Right now, it's 6% contained. That is certainly better than 0% when we were covering this just 24 hours ago. Talk about the status of fighting this fire, where things are right now, and how worried you are about the winds picking back up again.
Well, thank you for having me. This fire was something that we expected, we've planned for over the years. You never know when something like this is going to hit. We do have major fires in the area nearly every fire season, especially when these winds pick up. But this particular wind event was something that we haven't experienced in this area for at least a decade. When this fire broke out, we had already pre-deployed many fire crews, as did other fire departments throughout the region. And so we had extra resources on the ready. We responded very quickly, but due to those severe winds, every fire starts with a small spark. And by the time we were able to get our first crews on scene, it had already exploded into dozens of acres. And as you can imagine, with these winds pushing the embers, we had spot fires lighting off more areas of fire down the fire line over a mile away. So as you can imagine, as fire crews were getting on scene to try to get a handle on the fire that was burning, additional fires were starting ahead of it. And it started near a very densely populated area when it comes to residential as well as commercial businesses in the Palisades. It's been very taxing for our firefighters, to say the least. Many of the firefighters have been out on the line for the entire time that this fire has been burning. We're going on day 4. The fire did start at 10:30 in the morning on January 7th. That was Tuesday. And that was during one of the peaks of the wind event. We have gotten a little bit of a reprieve, but the winds have not died down completely. The forecast has been changing, so we have been adjusting our tactics in order to adapt to that. We do expect the winds to stay pretty consistent through this morning. We may get a little bit of a break in the afternoon. However, come this weekend on Sunday, we are hearing that we will get some moderate, at least what we call Santa Ana winds coming from the northeast and pushing towards the ocean.
And those are those hot, dry winds that make it even harder to fight these fires. I also want to ask you, Captain, just about the water pressure issues and the low water supplies we saw early on. How big of an issue was that? Is that still an issue today as you work to try and contain these fires?
So water pressure issues become a problem in basically every large wildfire that we fight. It was particularly bad during this fire because of the fact that the fire was so widespread. We had crews operating on multiple blocks with several structures burning that, as you can imagine, when all of our hoses are open, flowing water on these structures to try to save them, it reduces the pressure in any normal brush fire circumstance. This one in particular, we had some issues, as we do all the time. City water supplies are just not meant to be able to supply the capacity needed to protect as many structures that were affected by this particular fire. They're designed to, supply us with water from fire hydrants to put out a normal residential house fire. They're usually adequate to supply us for the average wildland fire. However, in these big wind-driven fires where it's a widespread use of those fire hydrants and those mains, we always do end up with issues. We got plenty of support from the Department of Water and Power. I was actually at the command post for 30 hours or so from the start of the Palisades fire out in the field. And we got water trucks. The Department of Water and Power assisted us as best they could. They were sending crews out to the field to try to do everything they could to assist us with augmenting that water pressure. But in a situation like this, there's really no way that we're going to ever have as much water as we need. So,
well, I know so many in the community are grateful for everything your teams are doing, working around the clock. Some of your firefighters have been injured in the process, but thank you for everything, Captain Brandon Silverman. We appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. Coming up, the Justice Department cracking down on rising rents by taking on 6 of the nation's largest landlords. More on the lawsuit that's accusing them of collaborating in a price-fixing scheme and their responses. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. The Justice Department is widening its antitrust lawsuit against a real estate software company. In a new development, the DOJ says that it's now going after 6 major landlords and property managers, accusing them of partnering in rent pricing schemes with RealPage. Here's NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton.
The Justice Department expanding a lawsuit against RealPage, accusing the software company of coordinating with landlords to pool non-public tenant data and coordinate to keep rents artificially high. Now adding 6 of the largest U.S. landlords and property managers to the suit, including Greystar, Camden, Cortland, Cushman & Wakefield, LivCor, and Willowbridge, representing more than 1.3 million units in 43 states and D.C. Many landlords use RealPage to help set rental prices and manage occupancy.
Optimize property performance even in challenging market conditions.
This summer, the DOJ alleged their software facilitated a price-fixing scheme.
This conduct had really corroded the market and allowed companies to put profits over people.
In the updated complaint, the DOJ says competing landlords conducted phone and email discussions, even cocktail hours, and participated in monthly user groups promoted by RealPage to share information. They quote one Greystar employee telling a competitor that a property manager had declined to fully participate due to, quote, price-fixing laws. That competitor replied, price-fixing laws, huh? That's a new one.
Price-fixing scheme, as alleged, is not only affecting the properties managed by RealPage's clients, it's causing a rent increase across the board.
RealPage told NBC News they deny the DOJ's claims and plan to fight them, saying their practices are legal and it's, quote, past time to stop scapegoating RealPage and now our customers for housing affordability problems. 2 landlords did not respond to NBC News for comment. 2 others denied the claims, vowing to vigorously defend themselves in court. Cushman & Wakefield, a management company, told NBC they should not have been named in the complaint and that their practices do not violate antitrust laws. And Cortland settled with the government, telling NBC they've developed their own software. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, New York.
Some more financial news this morning. Bloomberg is predicting hundreds of thousands of Wall Street jobs might take a hit over artificial intelligence. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and some other money headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you and happy Friday. Yeah, so global banks could cut as much as 200,000 jobs over the next several years. And all of this as artificial intelligence takes over roles currently handled by human workers. A report by Bloomberg Intelligence says back and middle office operations are likely to be the most at risk. Now, customer service could see changes as bots manage client relationships. Still, many banks have stressed a shift to AI will result in jobs being changed by technology rather than replaced outright. Uber is offering teenagers a free ride. So teens who recently failed their driver's test can sign up to get a free month of rides through their Uber Teen accounts. Now, they'll be asked to fill out a questionnaire about the test and have to provide information about the areas they missed and the reasons why. And Wicked has been popular in theaters and now also on the small screen. Universal says the movie racked up $70 million in sales in its first week of digital release. Wicked debuted on demand on New Year's Eve for $20 to rent and for $30 to buy it. Universal says the movie delivered the best first week of sales for any title, topping the Super Mario Brothers movie in 2023. Joe, I haven't seen the movie yet.
Oh, you have? It's one I would recommend seeing on the big screen, but I will say if you're going to sing along, please see it on the small screen at home. So no one else has to
I'll be quiet when I watch it.
All right. Silvana, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You got it, Joe.
Coming up, hooked on a feeling when we come back, how a teacher's assistant in Wisconsin is stitching up a special bond with her students with her crochet creations. This is Morning News Now. We end this hour with a story that just might hook your heart. A teaching assistant in Wisconsin is putting her crochet skills to the test by bringing her students' designs to life. Reporter Kim Leadholm from our NBC affiliate in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, has that story.
Made with love. It's a saying we've all heard.
When I was laid up, I started watching YouTube videos and taught myself how to crochet. It was something to keep my hands busy.
And Kimmy Horn, a paraprofessional with the Osseo Fairchild School District, kept her hands busy to gift her students with something special.
A hat.
Something made with love.
It's Kimmy made it.
Printed out blank stocking hats and gave them to each of the kids. I said you can pick 3 colors, then just let them have creative control and just go for it.
And with that creative control, Miss Kimmy helped the kids create something amazing.
Yeah, but on the other side, there's no spot of blue.
A unique hat to represent them.
It gave me like a little bit of time where I was like almost like with the kid, like one-on-one time, like with them. I see what they're drawing, and it really is their personality, how they colored it in.
Whether the hat is mainly solid colors or full of spunk, it's special because it shows the students anything is possible.
Learning isn't just numbers and letters, like there are other lessons in there, and just really instilling that confidence in them. Everything you imagine can become a reality.
Everything, even a hat that started as a piece of paper.
Knowing that what they can do, like, can actually become real, like, can just help with their learning throughout the years and just makes them so excited.
Hats and gloves can easily be lost. But at the Osseo Fairchild School District, there's some extra special hats.
This hat because Miss Kimmy made it.
Keeping heads and hearts warm.
This is the best thing.
Kim Leadholm, WEAU 13 News.
Those kids might be pre-K now, but I think they'll be holding on to those hats their entire lives. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us. The news continues right now. Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, the race is on to contain those catastrophic California wildfires. With the death toll rising, President Biden approving a major disaster declaration.
I told the governor and local officials, spare no expense to do what they need to do and contain these fires.
You just never think it's going to be you. And now that it is me, I can't tell you the amount of heaviness in this disaster.
Right now, nearly 200,000 people have been told to evacuate, but with crews already working overtime, new fires are popping up. We are on the ground with the very latest. Also this morning, a major winter storm sweeping the south. Some places could see their biggest snowstorm in years. The chaos canceling thousands of flights across the country. We're tracking the system. Plus, a historic first in U.S. history. President-elect Donald Trump set to be sentenced in his hush money case just 10 days before his inauguration. What we can expect in court and the 11th hour ruling that paved the way for today's sentencing. And it's Wild Card Weekend. Football fans gearing up for 6 games in 3 days. We're going to break down the must-watch matchups as the NFL playoffs officially kick off. We're going to begin this hour in Southern California, where at least 5 wildfires continue to cause widespread devastation. Strong wind gusts are expected again today, making it more challenging for firefighters on the ground. At least 10 people have been killed so far. The Palisades Fire, the largest of the 5, has burned more than 30 square miles. It's just 6% contained. The Eaton Fire, just outside of Pasadena, has spread to Mount Wilson, threatening the famed observatory there, as well as broadcasting transmitters for TV and radio stations. Firefighters also took on a new wildfire yesterday, the Kenneth Fire in the Woodland Hills area of Los Angeles. Evacuation orders that were put in place yesterday have since been lifted. NBC News senior national correspondent, News Now anchor Tom Yamas kicks off our coverage from the Pacific Palisades.
The problems keep mounting in parts of the Pacific Palisades. Besides the wildfires destroying everything in sight, you have areas where there is still water running, and this is obviously is not going to help that problem with the pressure and the fire hydrants. Over here you can see what was a neighborhood, what was a home. It is all completely gone. This car right here shows you how hot those fires got, burning everything in sight. You can't even make out what is inside. And these areas are also dangerous, and officials now want to implement a curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. to stop people from coming out here, but also to prevent looting where there have already been arrests.
This morning, as crews try to contain those massive Los Angeles wildfires, new ones are popping up. The Kenneth Fire igniting in the West Hills area. First responders moving in. Helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft trying to contain the fires from the skies, as overnight the Santa Ana winds kicked up again. In the Pacific Palisades, the fire that took so much is still growing.
It's devastating. All of my neighbors up across the top, their houses are gone.
A view from above showing the scorched earth of the devastated area. Many homes along the iconic Pacific Coast Highway in ruins, while the fight to save property and lives goes on. Ground crews working nonstop for some 60 hours straight.
It's been pretty hectic. You got, spotting from house to house, and you think you got control on one, and then the winds pick up, and another house catches on fire.
So many across the region now connected by loss.
I do know this. We will rebuild, and we will rebuild together.
Greg and Jennifer Champion among many in the Palisades who lost their home. The couple and their 3 daughters scrambling to get out alive.
She keeps asking to go home. And we are our home now. Wherever we go, that is our home.
Similar scenes taking place in the community of Altadena, where the Eaton fire has claimed some 4,000 to 5,000 structures.
I don't know how we're going to come back from this.
Flames from the Eaton fire traveling all the way up to the base of Mount Wilson, threatening a historic observatory and critical antennas and transmitters used to broadcast local TV to millions in the area. The mayor of Los Angeles requesting support from the National Guard and promising to rebuild.
We are going to clear the red tape and unnecessary delays and cost.
Among residents, anger is growing amid reports of hydrants running dry, which city officials say is due to high demand. One fire victim confronting California's governor.
Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor?
That's all literally.
Is it going to be different next time?
It has to be.
One of the nation's most beloved regions, now coping with an unimaginable loss. Officials are also pleading with people not to launch drones in these areas. There was an incident yesterday where a firefighting aircraft, it's known as a super scooper, it essentially picks up water, in this case the Pacific Ocean, it dumps it over the fire. A drone crashed into one of those aircrafts, making a hole in the wing. The aircraft had to land. It's going to be okay, but they're going to have to repair that. So officials are asking people, please, not to launch drones to try to get a look at what's happened here. Reporting from the Pacific Palisades, I'm Tom Yamas. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. For more, let's bring in Los Angeles City Councilwoman Tracy Park. She represents the Pacific Palisades. Councilwoman Park, good to have you with us. We spoke with you on Wednesday, just 48 hours ago. I know you've been out surveying the damage left behind by the fires. Tell us what you're seeing and just some of the landmarks that have been lost in this neighborhood.
These last 3 days have felt like a nightmare that no one can wake up from. The scenes on the ground in the Pacific Palisades are apocalyptic. The scope and the scale of the loss is absolutely catastrophic. As we're starting to get these images of the scale and the extent of this loss, it is hard to get your head around the fact that this beautiful, thriving, vibrant, wonderful community that once was is simply no longer. A couple of landmarks remain in the Pacific Palisades, but the vast, vast majority of people's homes and businesses are just gone.
You wrote on Facebook, systemic failures and underinvestment in first responders will be addressed. You said, this is a wake-up call for change. Talk about what change you're referring to. Are we talking about the fire department budget, the water tanks and hydrants running dry? What is the change that needs to happen?
Both of those things are part of the changes that need to happen. Los Angeles has suffered from decades of underinvestment in critical infrastructure, as well as chronic underfunding of our public safety partners, including the LA Fire Department. We have about the same number of fire stations and firefighters in Los Angeles that we had 60 years ago, but we are now a population of 4 million people, and the calls for service have tripled. We have about 100 fire engines and ambulances sitting in a boneyard because we don't have adequate mechanics to fix them. Back at the end of December, we received a standards of cover report from our fire chief, Kristen Crowley, who indicated that based on current budget and staffing levels, we are not adequately prepared to address wildfires. And that same report indicated that not only are some of our emergency response times already in normal circumstances twice the national standards, but just here in the city of Los Angeles, we need at least 62 new fire stations just to serve our average daily demand. And now seeing the absolute utter devastation in the Pacific Palisades, we have no choice as elected leadership here in the city of Los Angeles, but to correct course on this and ensure that our tax dollars are being invested in the infrastructure we need to sustain a modern population and the public safety resources we need to keep entire communities safe.
When it comes to immediate needs, I know you've been speaking with FEMA, with the governor, with the mayor. What is it you're telling them you need right now? Are you satisfied with how they've all been responding?
I want to really take a moment to thank our partners at the state and the federal level. Vice President Harris personally called me yesterday and offered all of the support and resources that we need. Our insurance commissioner reached out to me and assured that he would use the full weight of his authority to ensure that our policyholders will be covered. We are really looking forward to the arrival of additional National Guard resources to help relieve some of our police officers who are already stretched too thin from some of the duties that they're doing with traffic control, so we can free them up to address other issues around the city. This really, truly has been a remarkable all-layer of government response. And I think that's really important because as we look to the future, as we head into the wet weather season where mudslides and landslides are common, and then as we look to the future of rebuilding this incredible part of our city, it is going to take the federal government, the state government, and all of us here at the local level to get this done. And it is going to be a long, long road ahead.
Councilwoman Park, we appreciate your time this morning. Please continue to keep us updated on everything.
I will. Thank you so much.
Turning now from the fires in California to the extreme cold in the South. Parts of the country are waking up to frigid temperatures as the second major winter storm sweeps across the U.S. from the southern plains to the southeast. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park joins us now from Nashville with the very latest. Kathy, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. As you can see, the snow is starting to fall. This is just a small preview of what's to come. When it's all over, Nashville could be looking up to 6 inches of snow. Tennessee has already declared a state of emergency, and some parts of the South could be looking at their biggest snowstorm in years.
This morning, much of the South in the grip of a rare winter storm.
Our equipment's ready to go, our crews are ready to go, and we're ready to tackle this inclement weather event head on.
Heavy snow already blanketing parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and the Texas Panhandle. Residents in Kentucky bracing for round 2 of winter weather, barely recovering from another storm earlier this week.
It's like a virtual skating rink.
Nashville, Atlanta, and Little Rock all expected to see snow and in some cases ice accumulate today. While in Arkansas, shoppers nearly cleared out this grocery store.
This is what happens when you come to Sam's.
It is going to
snow in Arkansas.
Officials in Dallas warning drivers to take it slow or stay off the roads altogether.
Our volume of traffic accidents is roughly double what it normally would be on a typical day. So we still encourage folks, if you don't have to be out, don't go out.
In Georgia, crews have been pre-treating interstates, working 12-hour shifts ahead of the dangerous conditions, while travelers are gearing up for delays. Unusually cold temperatures even reaching as far south as Florida, catching some tourists off guard.
Thought it would be in shorts and a t-shirt, but no, more like bring a light jacket.
And even as this winter storm moves across the South, the frigid temperatures will be sticking around, so the snow and ice that accumulate today likely won't be melting until early next week, Joe.
All right. I lived in Nashville many years ago when a big snowstorm hit. It was quite the sight, not something that they're used to there. So hopefully everyone stays safe. Kathy, thank you so much. Appreciate it. For a closer look at the severe weather all around the country, let's get your morning news now. Weather Now, Angie Lastman is back. Hey there, Angie.
Hey there, Joe. Busy when it comes to the weather across the country for today. We'll see some improvements for tomorrow, so let's get you some of those details. 98 million people under these winter alerts. You just heard Kathy talking all about this storm system. It's going to start to wind down here as we get into the weekend. But for now, we've got the heavy snow stretch from basically the Great Lakes all the way down through the Tennessee Valley. Of course, the sleet, the freezing rain. That's a potential for folks right on that kind of line between the rain and the snow. And then you look farther south, and of course, we have some of that heavy rain, and that's where it's going to be kind of centered for essentially the rest of the day today, from the Great Lakes down to the southeast. So we have the heavy snow. This is, again, going to make it difficult for travel on a lot of these roadways, difficult for air travel, places like Cincinnati to Knoxville. Atlanta, that's one of the spots that's going to continue to see the potential for some icing, that freezing rain, the sleet, all going to make it really difficult on the roadways through the day today. Notice, though, as we get into tomorrow, yes, we'll still have maybe some of that freezing rain and snow kind of hanging around from the Carolinas up into the Northeast, but that'll make its way out of the picture, and we'll just see some isolated snow showers left over for folks across parts of the Northeast. Snow totals 6 to 8 inches, I think, on the higher end. Icing totals, I think, up to 1/4 of an inch. Again, that's around the Atlanta metro. That's near Columbia. So again, difficult on the roadways, at least through today. As we look out west, we've still got these red flag warnings, 17 million people. The winds are going to still be elevated, especially through the first half of today before we start to see some improving trends into the weekend. Notice right now gusts close to 80 miles per hour up in those mountains and hills closer to the coast. Not quite as impressive, but still 20, 30 mile per hour winds for the first half of the day. Not great for what they're dealing with. We will see those come down slightly as we get into the second half of today and even into the weekend, some improvements. But unfortunately, we're going to watch for this next Santa Ana wind event to start to take shape as we get into early next week, as a new high pressure works into parts of the Great Basin and kind of sets up shop there. That means that those offshore really dry, warm winds are going to continue for folks there, and they'll be elevated, Joe. So in the meantime, we still have a critical risk for some of this region. We'll keep that elevated risk into tomorrow, too, for much of Southern California.
Not what those firefighters wanted to hear. All right, Angie, thank you so much. With just 10 days until his inauguration, President-elect Trump is set to be sentenced later this morning in his New York criminal hush money case. It comes after the Supreme Court rejected Mr. Trump's last-ditch effort to try and block the sentencing in a 5-4 decision yesterday. The president-elect was convicted of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records related to hush money payments made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. That was in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election. The money was paid to cover up an alleged sexual encounter, one that Mr. Trump denies. NBC's Garrett Hake is outside the courthouse here in New York. Our legal analyst, Angela Senadella, is here with us on set. Good morning to both of you. Garrett, let's start with you. And, you know, you've essentially earned a law degree in the last year in addition to covering politics. So if you don't mind, walk us through this decision by the Supreme Court and why it declined to block the sentencing.
Yeah, I'll be handling personal injury cases after this, Joe. No, the court issued this one-page unsigned order that essentially doesn't answer the questions around presidential immunity that Trump and his attorneys had hoped to raise, arguing that immunity extended to him as president-elect, but instead said that basically, based on the outlines of what Judge Merchan has already signaled, both that Donald Trump doesn't have to appear today in person and that he's not going to receive jail time, essentially he's going to get off with a blemish on his permanent record, that it's not an undue imposition on him as president-elect to come here or to be sentenced today, and that this ought to go forward. It is essentially not too inconvenient, so go ahead and do it.
All right, Angela, let's bring you in here. Talk about what we can expect today. It is history, but it also, not a lot's going to happen, right?
Yeah, that's right. So look, this is the point where you would expect it to be run-of-the-mill, right? A sentencing. But this is 1 in a billion, like the entire trial, because there is literally no other profession I was thinking of in this country that ties the judge's hands in a practical way like this. Any other profession, the judge would not be required to really impose this unconditional discharge, which today will mean pretty much nothing. Now, look, the defendant, though, always has a chance to speak. So if Trump does appear by virtual, then look, he could make a statement. He could rant. He could say whatever he wants. Usually, though, you might be concerned that could affect the sentencing. But in this case, it's unlikely.
Garrett, Mr. Trump did react to the Supreme Court decision yesterday. Talk about what he had to say and just what he plans to do after the sentencing today.
I will say, Joe, is striking given how much venom Donald Trump has had for this whole process across the last 2 years, that his remarks last night were a little bit more restrained, clearly frustrated and angry with the judge, but accepting of the Supreme Court's ruling that today's sentencing would have to go forward. Listen to a little bit of what the president-elect had to say last night.
We're going to appeal anyway, just psychologically, because, frankly, it's a disgrace. It's a judge that shouldn't have been on the case. He's a highly conflicted judge, and they called for an appeal. So I read it, and I thought it was a fair decision, actually. So I'll do my little thing tomorrow.
Now, remember, Donald Trump has been under a partial gag order across the duration of this case. I think it is likely that as president, and once we get past the sentencing, we will probably continue to hear a lot more from him about it from time to time. Joe?
So, Angela, it's not just no jail time, it's no probation, yet we do still expect him to appeal. Explain to us how this appeals process is going to work. And I mean, normally that's a pretty standard run-of-the-mill thing, but it seems like everything that happens with the president-elect is unprecedented, is new, raises issues that have never been dealt with before. Could that be the situation here?
Yes. So, look, this is actually when the appeals process begins. We've heard the word appeal so much that you expect things to happen, but no, now is when the judgment of conviction against him is officially entered, and this is when it starts. So he can appeal the conviction now, both through the New York State courts and then also, again, appeal back to the Supreme Court. Now, we expect this to take a lot of time, as these appeals do, but it is possible that now, with a constitutional issue like this in front of the Supreme Court, perhaps the Supreme Court this time will agree to listen to this.
Bottom line, not fully done after today. All right, Garrett, Angela, thank you both. Appreciate it. The holidays might be over, but that doesn't mean the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree is done bringing joy. Later this hour, how the world's most famous tree will now help some families in need. Up first, America says goodbye to former President Jimmy Carter. The moving tributes at his funeral here in Washington. That's up next. Welcome back. The nation remembered former President Jimmy Carter in his state funeral yesterday. Friends, family, and dignitaries from both sides of the aisle gathered in Washington's National Cathedral to honor the life and legacy of the nation's 39th president. NBC's Ryan Nobles joins us now with more on how Carter was remembered. Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. The former president was honored with a beautiful and solemn ceremony where he was remembered for his life of service. And it also came with some interesting political interactions from some of the people that were in the audience. It was a solemn and understated ceremony for a solemn and understated man. Jimmy Carter, at the age of 100, lived longer and held the role of former president longer than any of his contemporaries.
To young people, to anyone in search of meaning and purpose, study the power of Jimmy Carter's example.
Carter's grandson, noting many of his views were ahead of his time.
He was the first millennial.
Civil rights leader Andrew Young reflecting on Carter's humble beginnings.
It's still hard for me to understand how you could get to be president from Plains, Georgia.
In the crowd of mourners, 3 rows of powerful politicians of all political stripes. Incoming President Donald Trump sitting behind Vice President Kamala Harris, who he beat in a divisive election. Trump sitting next to and laughing with former President Barack Obama. Last night, the president-elect addressing the attention on their exchange.
And I said, boy, they look like two people that like each other, and we probably do.
But there was perhaps more tension between Trump and former President Bill Clinton, along with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Trump's past opponent, and the wife of former Vice President Mike Pence, who Trump attacked in the aftermath of the 2020 election. Karen Pence staying seated as the president-elect greeted his running mate. But the speeches focusing on bipartisanship, including a eulogy written by former President Gerald Ford, read by his son.
By fate of a brief season, Jimmy Carter and I were rivals. But for the many wonderful years that followed, friendship bonded us.
And the former president's body was flown back to Plains, Georgia, his hometown, and the place he lived for most of his 100 years. He was laid to rest after one final motorcade through that small Georgia town that he made famous. Joe.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. International news now. New this morning, South Korea's presidential security chief is stepping down after last month's chaotic martial law declaration. NBC News international correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian has that and some other news from around the world. Danielle, good morning.
Morning, Joe. Yeah, and it's been chaos ever since. And so as it is in South Korea that we start with the resignation of the chief of the Presidential Security Service. Park Jong-joon faces police questioning over how his forces blocked efforts to detain the impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol, last week. It's been over a month of political turmoil there since Yoon's brief declaration of martial law back on December 3rd. Authorities are now planning a second attempt to bring Yoon into custody as they investigate whether that declaration amounted to an attempted rebellion. Over to the Middle East now, where after 2 years of gridlock, Lebanon finally has a new president. General Joseph Aoun, the commander of the Lebanese armed forces, won by an overwhelming majority in the second round of voting. The country endured an economic crisis followed by a war between the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah and Israel, which, according to the World Bank, has caused $8.5 billion worth of damage and losses. And finally, some good news out of Australia. A student who disappeared on December 26 during a hike with some friends has been found. He was located about 6 miles from a command post that had been set up as part of an extensive search operation. How did he survive? On berries, 2 muesli bars, and by drinking water from a creek. 13 very long days, but what a relief for his family, Joe.
Yeah, no kidding. He's got a story to tell there. All right, Danielle, thank you so much. Coming up, it has been days of historic destruction in Los Angeles, but from the ruins, ordinary people have turned into heroes. The signs of hope as a community rallies together. Welcome back. Let's return to our main story today, the wildfires in Southern California that are continuing to wreak havoc on so many people's lives. As this catastrophe has played out, we have heard countless stories of people who've sprung into action to help out. That includes first responders and just everyday folks who are stepping up. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz joins us now from Altadena near that stubborn Eaton fire and has more on some of these good deeds. Liz, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yeah, I mean, over the past few days, we have just seen horrific devastation. This is just some of it. This was an auto shop. Now you can see all of these charred cars here. This is just one of several businesses destroyed in the downtown Altadena area. We're also learning more about those who died. We know the death toll is now 10. I spoke to a woman who says her grandmother perished in this fire. But through all of this, we are seeing the best of humanity. I talked to one man who stayed back. He risked his life to help neighbors in their greatest time of need.
Shocking scenes still unfolding in Southern California, where flames continue to swallow up everything in sight. For Brianna Navarro, the loss unimaginable.
She loved her family.
She says her 83-year-old grandmother, Arlene Kelly, died inside her home.
It's devastating. We didn't expect to lose her so tragically.
Still burned for hours and hours.
Some residents becoming heroes.
You can see that tree was on fire.
When Scott Kay saw flames encroaching the street, he turned off gas lines and picked up garden hoses. He jumped in to fight the flames with a small team of neighbors.
I can't control any of this, but I can turn on a garden hose, you know. And I can turn off a gas line, so I can do what I can control.
And those small things made a big difference.
I don't know if they did or not.
Number of homes didn't burn, but yeah, Scott definitely saved a lot.
What do you want to say to Scott?
I think he is a hero.
In Pasadena, a crowd gathering overnight to hand out supplies for fire victims. Houses of worship, including this synagogue, opening doors to those in need.
This is now a refuge for the entire community, not just the Jewish community.
And first responders showing resilience in the face of adversity. In Altadena, courageously hopping over fences to rescue animals surrounded by fire. And star Jamie Lee Curtis, whose neighborhood was destroyed, pledging $1 million to relief efforts. Actor James Woods highlighting a local pharmacy that's helping provide evacuees with critical medications. The pharmacy's owner saying not helping was never an option.
That's just what community pharmacy does. We definitely put others before ourselves.
Now, several businesses and companies are stepping up to offer free or discounted services and resources to fire evacuees. Airbnb is offering free temporary housing. Uber is offering $40 travel stipends. Planet Fitness is offering folks a place to come and shower, use lockers, and use Wi-Fi there. And several restaurants around the city are offering free food to those in need. Joe.
So important to shine a light on all of those heroes out there. Liz, thank you so much. And that synagogue Liz just showed us moments ago, it actually has special meaning to one of our own NBC News correspondents. Jacob Soboroff was one of its congregants when he was growing up there in the Pacific Palisades. He has a closer look at how this house of worship has become a beacon of hope for the entire community.
Everything across the street from the synagogue burnt down, but the synagogue is still here. What's it like to see it?
Surreal.
Unbelievable.
For Rabbis Amy Bernstein and Daniel Schur and Cantor Chaim Frankel, seeing the Kehilat Israel synagogue standing amid so much devastation is staggering.
Look at this. This is the ash that came through the door?
Yeah.
Knowing what happened outside of these walls and seeing even just this piece is...
The remnants of the Palisades is right here.
Wow. This is the community in which I went to preschool.
Yes. Yeah.
My siblings had their bar mitzvahs here.
This is now a refuge for the entire community, not just the Jewish community.
You know what, Chaim? You could fill the sanctuary with your congregants who have lost their homes.
Correct.
Yes.
At least this home is standing for so many people, so many of us. This is our home.
When tragedy strikes and disaster strikes, we turn to our faith. And that's what this represents. I sing this lovingly for our community to heal. Baruch Shem Kevod, Shem Kevod Malachuto, Leolam
And our thanks to Jacob Soboroff for sharing that story, a story we will continue to tell in the weeks and months to come. Coming up, breaking economic news, what the critical final jobs report of 2024 says about the labor market as we begin this new year. Stay with us. On this busy Friday morning, we're back with some breaking economic data. The final jobs report of the Biden administration just came out. The U.S. economy added 256,000 jobs in December. That was more than expected. The unemployment rate came in at around 4.1%. Here to talk about all this, what it means for you, our senior business correspondent, Christine Roman. So first of all, just walk us through the numbers here.
A strong end to the year. 256,000 jobs added in December is far more than many economists had expected. They've been expecting kind of a gradual easing. And if you look longer term at what this looks like, these are really solid numbers to end the year. You know, we'd had some strikes and storms earlier in the fall where you saw hiring cool. All of that has been made up for. And so ending the year pretty strongly, 2.23 million jobs added for the year. Now that we have the final tally.
That is the final tally for the year. Can we break it down a little bit by category and by industry? What are we seeing? Where are some of the strongest gains?
Healthcare adding a lot of jobs again. This has been a pretty vibrant part of the American economy, about 46,000 jobs there. Healthcare services, nursing homes, anything you can think of having to do with taking care of people, doing pretty well here. Retail trade, also jobs up there, 43,000. That's after a loss in November. So that's probably a lot of holiday hiring, end of the year kind of hiring, government jobs, social assistance. Leisure and hospitality was pretty much flat. We'd seen a lot of lower wage hiring there. But all in all, this is a strong end of the year.
Bottom line, this is basically where we end the Biden economy after 4 years. And the economy was a huge issue in the campaign. It's one of the reasons many people feel President-elect Trump did win. How do we sum up this economy and where it stands right now?
This is a solid economy, a robust job market, not as on fire as last year, which is probably a good thing, but handing a really decent performance over to the next president with a lot of question marks for what new policies will mean for all of this. I will say, when you're looking at 16 million jobs created in the Biden administration, and there'll be probably a little bit more because some of that will be January job creation as well. That's a pretty admirable performance if you look historically.
All right, let's talk about the Federal Reserve, because we know they've been slowly cutting the interest rates over the last few months. They're going to meet again. What do we expect to happen now? Could they pause that for a moment?
So you cut interest rates when you're trying to goose an economy, when you're trying to support an economy. If you look at numbers like this, there's no reason to be cutting interest rates with 256,000. That actually could add to inflation and make things a little more bubbly in the overall economy. So I think you can expect the Fed will pause here and not be cutting interest rates. And that means we've got mortgage rates right now this week back near 7% again. So we've got the Compass CEO, telling NBC News that you could have 2 years of mortgage rates still high. So I don't think you're going to see a rate cut in the very super near term. You'll have the Fed pause to see just how robust the economy is.
When we talk about wages, what are we seeing with wage growth right now?
So wages, 3.9% wage growth. So that means wages are still rising faster than inflation. It takes time for people to feel that as better purchasing power, but that's good for consumer spending. It's good for people being able to pay their bills. 3.9%, a little light, not quite the 4%, but still, that's a number that still shows strength in the economy and strength for the consumer.
Big picture, just what does this mean for the wallets of everyday Americans right now?
The job is the most important driver of most people's economy, right? So this means that there are plentiful jobs, people are hiring. I did see something in these numbers, though, that I think is important to note. Long-term unemployed, that's people out of work for 6 months or longer. That's actually up from last year. So there are people, especially in medical tech and in technology, in some sectors of the economy that when I say it's a strong job market, they say it's not for me, because there are some pockets where it's taking people a little longer to find a job when they're out of work. So that's just one sort of little crack under what is overall a pretty strong foundation.
All right, Christine Romans, appreciate you breaking it down for us. Thanks so much. All right, CNBC's Silvana now has more on some of the other major money headlines out there right now. Hey there, Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Well, TikTok is fighting for its life as the U.S. Supreme Court hears arguments today over a law aiming to ban the popular app on January 19th if it isn't sold by its Chinese parent company. Now, TikTok has said it plans to shut down in the U.S. unless the court strikes down the law or delays the deadline. The end of TikTok could mean a big boost for rivals because analysts estimate 80 to 90% of TikTok's U.S. ad revenue would go to Meta and Alphabet, while the rest could filter down to Pinterest and Snapchat. Macy's is closing 66 underperforming stores as part of a broader plan to shut about 150 locations over 3 years. Most of the stores set to close will shut down in the first quarter. Last year, Macy's announced it would focus on 350 so-called go-forward stores as it tries to return to profitable sales growth. And Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin is set for the first launch of its giant New Glenn rocket this weekend. If successful, it could pose a challenge to the industry leader in SpaceX, which is owned by Elon Musk. Now, the New Glenn rocket, which is 30 stories tall, has been the core focus for Blue Origin for the past decade. There are dozens of launches and hundreds of millions of dollars in potential business at stake. Blue Origin has booked multi-launch deals with several satellite operators. Joe?
Getting crowded up there. All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
Tomorrow marks the last day the iconic Rockefeller Center Christmas tree will stand in the plaza. Every year since 2007, the tree has been donated to the nonprofit Habitat for Humanity to help build affordable housing across the U.S. This year's tree is going to return to the town where it was grown in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, to help build 26 new homes. Spokesperson for Habitat for Humanity International, Adrienne Goolsby, joins us now. She is the Senior Vice President of their U.S. and Canada offices. Adrienne, good to have you with us. I was there covering the tree when it was still in the ground in the Berkshires, a beautiful part of the country. It's so cool to see this tree can now change more than 24 lives. Explain to us this process and how it's going to be used for these new homes.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having us on today. It is an amazing relationship that we have with the Rockefeller Center since 2007. And what we do know is that it's the Central Berkshire habitat, the tree where it was grown, is going to return back to that community. And what is really amazing about the whole opportunity is that it's quite inspiring to see the journey of the tree since you were there at the beginning from when it was cut to actually how it's sharing with millions of people at the Rockefeller Center from a visual, beautiful perspective to then being used to help present affordable housing for families that are in need in the community where the tree was raised. And so it's a story and a full journey of the tree. What will happen after it leaves Rockefeller Center is that it will actually, go to the mill. It will be cut in large pieces, go to the mill, put in lumber pieces as well, and then actually printed with the Rockefeller Center symbol. Just to say that, hey, this was donated from the Rockefeller Center, and it will be used for the first riser of the stairs in the first home as families are going up and walking into their new homes. And so we are just so excited for the full journey of the tree and the inspiration that it brings.
That emblem on there. So we know it's supposed to be 26 homes this year. Do we have a number of just overall how many homes the Rockefeller Center trees have helped build over the years?
Oh my goodness. I know that there are dozens that it's helped to build over the years. As far as the exact number, we don't have the exact number right now, but it's definitely in the dozens. And we've been doing this since 2007. And we had actually a tree that went back in 2022 back to the New York area to build homes as well. So this is a longstanding relationship, and we love the relationship that we have with the Rockefeller Center and in leveraging the tree and helping to provide affordable housing for everyone.
How is it you decide where the tree's lumber is going to go?
So as far as the placement in the house, because the tree, as you know, the lumber is a little softer than the normal lumber that we would use to build with, it is really good for flooring, and it's good for supporting stairs as well as any type of beautification that will happen in the house when you're thinking about cabinetry and that kind of thing. For this particular first house, we've decided that it would be used as support beams for the first riser and stair in the house as the family's walking in. And so that's how we decide. We work with the affiliate Central Berkshire Habitat for Humanity and their teams, the Repair Corps, as well as the local school, vocational school. We have students who will be working to help build with that lumber for those homes in the 26 families. And we work with them together to identify from a construction perspective how the wood would be used.
You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the late President Jimmy Carter. He and his wife, Rosalind, led the Carter Work Project for Habitat for Humanity for more than 30 years. Just talk about what his legacy means to your organization.
I mean, as you well know, the impact that the Carters have had, especially President Carter and Rosalind Carter, on Habitat is something that you cannot think about Habitat without thinking about the Carters, and think about the Carters without thinking about Habitat. His legacy will live on. His legacy and his ideas around everyone deserves a decent place to live will continue. And him supporting the mission of affordable housing and housing affordability across the world is something that we will never forget, nor will individuals who have been impacted. You're talking about individuals, he's built over nearly 4,500 homes and worked in over 14 countries, as well as, impacting, when we're thinking about Habitat, has impacted over 62 million individuals worldwide. And so his legacy continues to live on. I think about many times when he's on the Carter Work Project and he's working diligently alongside with other individuals and his wife. And he's like, hey, get back to work. And I think he would say right now, in the midst of it, he's like, I might have moved on to the next realm, but what I expect is that you all will all work together in the name of humanity and get back to work and start building these houses and lifting your voices around housing affordability and the importance of it around the world. So,
Adrienne,
we can't thank him enough, and his legacy and his family.
Adrienne Goolsbee, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, with less than 1 month away from the Super Bowl now, we're looking at some of the can't-miss matchups across the NFL as the playoffs officially get underway. The road to the Lombardi Trophy is going to start this weekend with the wild card games. 12 teams battling it out to make it to next year's divisional round. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk is here with a preview of all the big games to come. Steph, good morning.
Good morning. I might be watching a little bit of football this weekend, Joe. You know, this is always an exciting weekend of football because it's usually the best time for the biggest upsets. The really great teams are expected to move on, but the teams that barely made it into the playoffs are more than ready to steal the glory.
6 games, 12 teams. It's not called Super Wildcard Weekend for nothing. There could be some big surprises.
It's 2 games on Saturday. Yes. It's 3 more on Sunday. Yes. And then it's like, whoa, we get a Monday night gift on top of that.
Looking for upset wins, teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers and Denver Broncos, led by rookie quarterback Bo Nix.
If we're going to make it, we might as well go win some games.
Standing in his way, Buffalo Bills QB Josh Allen. All eyes will be on the MVP hopeful, but he knows he'll need his whole team to win.
We're all each other's biggest supporters, and, you know, when we step on that field, we just want to see everybody play well.
In some respects, it's the best teams and players who may have the most pressure, like Allen and Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens.
We know it's at stake. You know, it's when to go home.
The one thing they don't have on their resume is the Super Bowl appearance.
Do you think they have the most to lose this weekend?
I think they have the most to lose.
In the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles are happy to have QB Jalen Hurts back practicing this week after suffering a concussion. They will need all their weapons against the Green Bay Packers. In Tampa on Sunday Night Football, the Bucs will host the Washington Commanders, a long shot to make the playoffs this year. That was until QB Jaden Daniels had a jaw-dropping rookie season.
You got to stay who you are throughout the week. Go out there and just play ball.
For the LA Chargers and Rams, both playing in the wild card, a chance to lift their city's spirits after a terrible week.
What sports represents is an opportunity for people to come together, provide a temporary sense of relief.
Because of the deadly fires in Southern California, the NFL announced the Rams will have to play their playoff game against the Vikings in Arizona.
The 2 teams with the best records, the Detroit Lions and Kansas City Chiefs, have a chance to rest before the next playoff round. Whoever wins this weekend, Joe, it's still going to be a really tough road to the Super Bowl. But I know you're pulling for your Vikings.
Of course, I'm pulling for the Vikings, who've still never won a Super Bowl. So maybe this is finally the year.
We'll see what Arizona for Monday?
Exactly. I will not make it to Arizona, but I will be watching. All right, Stephanie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, it's Friday. That can mean only one thing. It's time for your can't-miss list. After the break, we're going through the latest and greatest in entertainment, including a performance by Pamela Anderson that is getting a lot of buzz. That's next. Welcome back. It's Friday, which means it's time for your weekly can't-miss list. All the films and shows you need to see this weekend, especially if it's cold and you're just staying outside. We're joined by NBC New York Digital reporter Kay Ingram with so many new things to discuss. Always good to have you with us, Kay.
Joe.
All right, so let's start off with a movie that's just been getting so much buzz. It's The Last Showgirl. Stars Pamela Anderson of Baywatch fame back in the day. She's a showgirl who's been performing for, 30 years, and her show is going to be canceled. She's already got a Golden Globe nomination from this one, and the buzz just keeps going, right?
The buzz just keeps going. And speaking of Golden Globe nominations, we also got a new Miley Cyrus song in the movie as well that she wrote for it, which was nominated for a Golden Globe. But speaking of the storyline, you got it just right. So she's been a performer for 30 years, but now she's left to figure out her life. What does she do next now that the show is closing? And of course, she has to deal with, ageism, sexism, figuring out what to do next. I will say, though, that the responses, critics, it's kind of like a mixed bag. Some people are like, this is amazing. Other people are like, yeah, they could have done better. Okay. So the jury's out on that. But it also stars Brenda Song. You've also got Jamie Lee Curtis, who we know this week has, been very public about donating, $1 million? $1 million, for the wildfires relief.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we'll see if she gets an Oscar nomination. She's got the Golden Globe nom, so we'll see what happens next. All right, so also in theaters, Hard Truths. It's a powerful British drama. It talks about depression, and it's being praised by critics as well. What should we know?
It is. I'm actually really glad that my producer Chris included this one in our list because it really is interesting. It follows this family in Britain, in London, and so essentially it's families navigating family-type stuff. Now, I know that sounds vague, but I think that's the big draw of what people are really liking about this film that's in theaters is that you can relate to it. It resonates. It talks about complicated family dynamics, mental health, which is hard, those dynamics which are hard, and some of those truths around that, which, of course, can be a hard pill to swallow. It's from the legendary director, Mike Leigh, and so it's really incredible of a watch that could be underrated, but I hope a lot of people go to watch.
All right, let's shift gears here. See what I did there? Ooh. Shifting Gears is a new sitcom. It's on ABC. It's with Tim Allen. I feel like it's the 90s. Tim Allen in an ABC sitcom.
He's back.
What should we know about this?
Well, yes, one of our favorite TV dads is back, and he is in Shifting Gears. It's this new sitcom on ABC, like you mentioned. He is this widowed, stubborn dad, and essentially he gets reconnected with his daughter, and she comes into his life. Not just herself, it's also her teenage kids who are with her, and they end up moving in. So you can only imagine what happens with that. So you've got that series that you can watch on Hulu. And yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, for one, it's Tim Allen, and if you are missing Home Improvement, which some critics say the show might need a little bit of that, that's actually going to be on Netflix in February. So.
It needs a little improvement. All right. All right, here's one that I know you think needs no improvement at all, and that is The Traitors on Peacock. It is back. This is one of your favorites, isn't it?
It is one of my favorites. I'm such a loyal Traitors fan. Can I just say, Alan Cumming and his Fitz, like, that is the can't miss. Truly, you need nothing else. But if you are interested in the show and how it works, it's a competition, and they're back for their 3rd season, and folks are trying to get up to $250,000, but all they have to do is figure out who are the traitors, who are the faithfuls, and this season we're joined by Bob the Drag Queen. You've got...
I see Britney Spears' ex on there?
Yes! Okay, and then also we've got Tom Sandoval, so that's going to be interesting to see which one.
Yeah.
He ends up being.
Of course, Dorinda's in it.
Classic. It's so funny and it's so good. It just like you want to sink your teeth into it every episode. So that'll be.
It is a fun show. I watched the first season. I have to admit, I did enjoy it. All right, we got a little less than a minute here. There's a cop drama out called Call, and it's interesting because it uses body camera footage and takes some interesting approaches, right?
Yeah, and I really like that. For me personally, like I love when directors and shows or movies they get interesting, right? The perspectives are different, and so they're using exactly that, the dash cam video, the cell phone footage. They're using body cam footage to offer different perspectives. And so it is about cops who are in California, and they're riding around, doing what cops do. But, of course, there's drama to it, and you can watch that on Prime right now. If you're looking to binge something, all 8 episodes are out right now.
All right. That's the best when you can watch it all at once and you don't have to wait. Hey, Ingram, great list this week. Thank you so much for everything. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, friend.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now, but don't go anywhere. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.